The first time Richard Carter held his newborn daughter, the hospital room was filled with celebration. Doctors smiled. Nurses congratulated him. Cameras flashed as one of the world's richest entrepreneurs welcomed his only child into the world. Richard leaned over the tiny bundle in his arms and whispered, "Welcome to the world, sweetheart." Emily blinked, staring into his eyes. She never reacted to his voice. At first, no one noticed. Babies developed differently, the pediatricians explained. Some responded to sound sooner than others. Richard accepted their reassurance, believing time would solve everything. But by the time Emily was nearly a year old, something still wasn't right. A thunderstorm shook the windows one evening. The crash of thunder startled everyone in the mansion except Emily. She continued stacking colorful blocks on the carpet, smiling quietly as if nothing had happened. Richard's heart sank. Within days she underwent countless medical examinations. Weeks later the specialists delivered news that changed both their lives forever. Emily had profound bilateral hearing loss. She wasn't simply hard of hearing. She lived in complete silence. Richard refused to believe the diagnosis. Money had solved every problem he had ever faced. He built companies from nothing, rescued failing businesses, and donated millions to medical research. Surely there had to be a solution. Over the next 12 years, he searched everywhere. The world's finest hospitals welcomed him. Experts from Boston reviewed Emily's scans. Researchers in Germany proposed advanced therapies. Clinics in Japan suggested experimental procedures. Every meeting ended exactly the same way. "We're deeply sorry. No available treatment can restore her hearing." Richard returned home after each trip carrying expensive reports but no answers. Emily never complained. She grew into a bright, kind, remarkably cheerful girl. She loved painting birds, reading adventure novels, gardening with the mansion staff, and watching sunsets from the balcony. She communicated beautifully through sign language. She laughed often. Yet Richard sometimes caught her watching families in parks. Children laughed as their parents called their names. Emily smiled politely before looking away. Every birthday she received mountains of presents. Designer dolls. Ponies. Jewelry. Trips around the world. Yet after every celebration she quietly folded a tiny piece of paper and slipped it into her father's hand. Richard never opened them in front of her. Instead, late at night he unlocked the safe in his office. Inside were 12 carefully folded birthday wishes. Each one carried almost identical words. "I wish I could hear Dad say he loves me." Richard cried every single time. Despite running an international business empire, he began spending less time in boardrooms and more time with Emily. He learned basic sign language, though not nearly as well as he wished. Too often interpreters stood between them. Emily never minded. Richard did. One autumn morning, Richard traveled to a remote mountain community where his foundation planned to build a children's medical center. Emily insisted on joining him. She loved road trips. The convoy included luxury SUVs, personal assistants, bodyguards, and security vehicles. Dark clouds gathered overhead. Rain soon poured so heavily that visibility almost disappeared. Without warning, the lead vehicle stopped. Richard's driver stepped out. Minutes later the chief of security approached. "Sir, we've got engine trouble. A damaged fuel line." "How long?" "Hard to say. Phone signals had disappeared." The nearest town lay miles away. Wind howled through the trees while rain soaked everyone standing outside. Nearly 40 minutes passed. Then, through the curtain of rain, an old blue pickup truck approached slowly. Its paint was faded. One headlight flickered. The truck looked completely out of place beside the Billionaire's convoy. It stopped. A tall man climbed out wearing worn boots, jeans, and an old brown jacket. Beside him jumped a boy around Emily's age carrying a weathered backpack almost as large as himself. The man tipped his cap politely. "Looks like you folks need a hand." Before Richard could answer, 2 security guards stepped forward. "We've got it under control." The stranger nodded without offense. "If you're sure." He turned toward his truck. Just then one frustrated mechanic muttered loudly, "I can't find the leak." The stranger paused. "Mind if I take a look?" The mechanic hesitated. Richard finally spoke. "Go ahead." The man knelt beside the engine. He examined the damaged line for less than a minute. Then he reached into his toolbox, removed a small metal connector and a length of reinforced tubing, and began working with calm, practiced movements. 10 minutes later he stood up. "Try it now." The engine roared to life immediately. Every mechanic stared in disbelief. Richard raised an eyebrow. "You're a mechanic?" The man smiled faintly. "No. What do you do?" "I used to serve." "Military?" He nodded. "Former Navy SEAL." The entire security team fell silent. Meanwhile, Emily noticed the young boy standing a few feet away. He smiled warmly but didn't speak. Instead, he raised his hands and began signing. "Hi. My name is Noah." Emily's face lit up with surprise. For the first time in a long while, she met another child who spoke her language without needing an interpreter. Within moments, the 2 children were laughing silently beneath the rain shelter, their hands moving faster and faster as they shared stories. Richard watched them, unable to look away. He turned back to the stranger. "You know sign language?" The man glanced toward the children with quiet affection. Then he answered softly. "My late wife was deaf." Those 4 words changed everything. Part 2. Richard stood silently as the rain eased around them. For a long moment, neither man spoke. Finally, Richard extended his hand. "I'm Richard Carter." The former SEAL shook it firmly. "Jack Sullivan." Richard glanced toward Emily and Noah. The children were sitting on the back of the pickup truck, laughing through sign language as if they had known each other for years. "I haven't seen her smile like that in a very long time," Richard admitted. Jack smiled gently. "My wife used to say that silence isn't loneliness. Feeling misunderstood is." Those words stayed with Richard. He invited Jack and Noah to the Carter estate for dinner before continuing their journey. Jack hesitated but eventually agreed. That evening, Emily proudly gave Noah a tour of the mansion. Despite its size and luxury, Noah seemed more interested in the treehouse in the garden than the marble halls or expensive artwork. During dinner, Richard watched Jack communicate fluently in sign language with Emily. "You learned all this for your wife?" Richard asked. Jack nodded. "I promised I'd never make her feel alone." Richard lowered his eyes. "I spent millions trying to restore my daughter's hearing, but I never realized she needed me to truly enter her world." Jack smiled. "It's never too late." The next morning, before leaving, Jack reached into Noah's old backpack and carefully removed a small wooden box. Inside lay an old military challenge coin and a tiny bone conduction hearing device that had once belonged to his late wife. "It won't perform miracles," Jack said honestly. "Every person's condition is different. But this device helped my wife detect certain sounds after months of therapy. Perhaps Emily's doctors could evaluate whether similar technology might help her." Richard accepted the box as though it contained priceless treasure. Within weeks, leading audiologists examined Emily again. Inspired by Jack's experience, they designed a customized bone conduction system and began intensive therapy. Progress came slowly. First, Emily noticed vibrations. Then she recognized footsteps. Months later, she distinguished a knock on the door from a clap. Every tiny improvement felt like a victory. Richard also changed. He hired no more interpreters for family conversations. Instead, he mastered sign language himself. Every evening father and daughter spent hours talking with their hands, laughing more than ever before. One afternoon, after another adjustment to Emily's hearing device, the therapist gave Richard a gentle nod. He took a deep breath. "I love you, Emily." Emily paused. Her eyes widened. She touched the device behind her ear and looked at her father with tears filling her eyes. Slowly, she signed while smiling through happy tears. "I heard something." Richard embraced her tightly. For the first time, hope no longer felt impossible. Months later, Richard established a foundation that funded hearing research, sign language education, and assistive technology for children regardless of their family's income. When reporters asked what inspired such generosity, Richard pointed toward Jack and Noah, sitting quietly in the audience. "No amount of wealth could give my daughter hope," he said. "A humble father with a kind heart did." Emily kept Jack's late wife's military challenge coin on her desk for the rest of her life. Whenever someone called her story a miracle, she smiled and replied. It wasn't magic. It was compassion, patience, and people who refused to give up on each other.